Okay, so welcome and hopefully I have stopped sharing. Welcome to the Great Debate. How exciting is this? This is the first time that here at the CCMA we've done a Great Debate. It's the first time that we have brought two parties together to have a debate around a particular issue. And I'm delighted that today we have got Mark Walton, the CEO from Sensée. Please do join us, Mark. And also we have Megan Neal, the COO at Limitless, joining us. Hi, Megan.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hi, Lee.
Good morning. So the great debate, employed versus gig model. That's what we're talking about today. And if we think about why this has come to a fore, obviously the year that we've had, there's loads of talk about changing operating models. How are we going to do this? What does the future look like? And contact center leaders are starting to look at what their options are. So Sensée, Mark, I know Sensée has obviously made a name for itself in particular this year around home working and flexible working. And Megan, Limitless is really coming into the scene around gig working and looking at gig CX. So how is this all going to work today? So over the next hour, just like a formal debate that you might have down in Westminster, I'm going to ask Mark and Megan, first of all, just 2 minutes tops to tell us a little bit more about their business models. Who are Sensée, who are Limitless. And then I'm going to ask Mark to put forward a proposition around employed working. I'm then going to turn to Megan and ask Megan to put forward an opposition around gig CX. Then I will go back to Mark and ask him for a response, at which point then Megan has an opportunity to respond again, all timed. And during, while you're listening to what's going on, please do start sharing your thoughts, your comments, your questions in the Q&A functionality that hopefully you can all see on Zoom. And ideally, please use the Q&A functionality rather than chat. I've got both windows open because once we've heard from both Mark and Megan around the employed model or the gig model, then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions, for you to share your comments. Do you like one? Do you like the other? What's your views around all of this? Before we close the session, asking a pertinent question around whether you are someone in favor of gig, someone that's in favor of employed model, or actually whether you think that there's a place for both. So that's how it's going to work. So my first port of call is over to you, Mark. 2 minutes, please tell us a little bit more about Sensée.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Yep, I'm Mark Walton, I'm the Chief Exec of Sensée. Sensée is a business which is, fundamentally, we're a business process outsourcer. So we provide customer care, sales, tech support services to a lot of the UK's leading blue chip brands, most of which you'll have heard of. We have about 1,400 employees across UK and Ireland. Every single one of those employees works from home. So as you can imagine, we've been very, very busy over the last 7 months. In addition to that, they're all fully employed. So we employ everybody that works for us on a mix of different hours to suit them, but they're fully employed with everything that goes along with that. So holiday pay, sick pay, etc. So that's the BPO side of our business. In addition to that, we provide technology that enables organizations to get their own people working from home. And we also have a consultancy services division, which enables our clients to have access to our learnings that we've developed over the past 16 years. That's about it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark. Megan, please tell us a little bit more about Limitless.
Yeah, very, very happy to. So some of you may be aware of Gig CX and some of you may not. So really just to summarize, Limitless is a Gig CX platform. And what that means is we crowdsource customer support. So organizations that we work with, typically large enterprise brands the world over, route customer service inquiries securely through our smart crowd platform. and distribute them to knowledgeable and passionable people. We call them gig CX experts, but fundamentally they are typically customers of the brand who love the brand and use the brand or products and services every single day, and therefore are really, really well placed to support that brand with some additional support, which we provide via our business and technology. So why do customers do that? So organizations are typically using gig CX to reap benefits of an always on, agile, and also highly motivated group of people that deliver amazing customer service because they quite simply love the brands and they're doing it on their own terms. It's also much lower cost and there are no bricks and mortar. You know, we are a platform business and there's also no overhead salaries to support. So if you think about the team managers, the quality managers, the trainers, the recruiters that we all typically need in contact center setups. So from one side, the gig CX experts really have the freedom to do the task whenever they want to do it and do it for as long as they want to do it. But most importantly for us is that they are rewarded fairly. And I'm really looking forward to the debate today, which will really help us challenge some of the traditional and perhaps market sort of perception of gig economy and help you understand that actually not all gig is bad. And actually, in fact, a lot of gig is good. And we are a good gig business.
Perfect. Good timing. That was just shy of 2 minutes. Thank you, Megan. So, Mark, looking at it from an employed perspective, why should businesses employ their staff? Over to you, Mark, to put forward the proposition.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Well, I think I'll start by saying that I've worked in the customer service and contact center type industries for over the past 20 years. Most of that time was spent in traditional brick and mortar contact center organizations, but I've spent a couple of years working for an outsourcer that used the gig economy model. And then the last 2 years I've spent as chief exec of Sensée working within this employed model. So I feel I've got a sort of a reasonable grasp of both models actually. For the past 16 years, Sensée has been the UK's only employee-based home working company. So as a business, our ethically driven philosophy has been based around treating employees fairly, paying above the real living wage, providing high quality, accessible careers for people, regardless of geography, disability, gender, class, creed, colour, etc. I believe that this results in happier colleagues and happier employees, which results in better, more consistent performance for our business clients through delivering great experiences for their customers. I think the employee-based home working model is actually the way forward. As we work in a relatively low paid industry, most of us I think are in the business process outsourcing industry, I think that it's more important than ever that these workers receive the protections and the stability of employment, and that this often underrepresented community, about 87% of all people in the gig economy earn less than £10,000 a year. So I think it's important that this underrepresented community is able to access a guaranteed income, sick pay, national insurance contributions, holidays, etc. I think, yes, people want flexibility and the freedom to get on with their other non-working lives, but I think they also want freedom from poverty, illness, sickness and insecurity. Sensée have our own virtual customer contact centre. So we are a contact centre business. This provides services that you'll be aware of, so phone, web chat, social media, for forward-thinking brands like Bupa, L&G, Northumbrian Water, Allianz, etc. So big blue chip organisations. As you probably guessed, all of those 1,400 employed customer service advisors work from their own individual homes, and it truly is a diverse model. So they're spread all over the UK, from Land's End to John O'Groats via Belfast. That means that we get access to a different type of workforce. So as an example, about 20% of our workforce is registered disabled, about 10% of them are carers for the disabled, high proportion of return to work mums and dads with childcare issues, about a third of our employees live in what we call rurally disadvantaged communities, so middle of Wales, Cornwall, Highlands and Islands of Scotland, for example. And a large proportion of our employee base, whilst it's also young, is also over 65. We also, as I mentioned earlier on, we share our technology and our expertise to enable people to access this so that they can do this themselves as well. As an ethical organisation, Sensée only provide employment contracts with guaranteed hours. There is definitely no gig working in our business, no 0-hour contracts, no self-employment rules that we believe just make life more complicated. We're also proud to be an equal opportunities employer, and we believe that diversity is our strength. We regularly win awards for our best practice methodologies, people practices, corporate and social responsibility credentials. So I think that our wide mix of people, including many of them from underrepresented groups, women, BAME, those with disabilities, LGBT, etc., our diverse workforce is as balanced as the very best organisations in the UK. Finally, I believe that when people's incomes and livelihoods are at stake, especially when considering those more vulnerable members of our society, typically those on lowest incomes, I believe that people need and deserve legal protections and benefits and securities of an employed model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. There are some compelling points that I think you made there, and I can't wait to hear what Megan is going to say when she puts forward the opposition. So, Megan, why GigCX?
I really would like to start and just take a little step back and share my macro view of the challenges that our industry is facing and also the opportunities that presents. For me, this decade will turn existing contact center paradigms upside down for good. Nothing is going to be the same again. The introduction of the new methods of resourcing that we're talking about today will drive both an empathetic human-to-human conversation as well as those that are transactional and automated. We have to find that blend between human and AI. Currently, schedules are typically based on fixed employment contracts, as we've just heard. And the result of that is that fundamentally, those fixed employment contracts are largely returning 90% identical results in terms of availability of resource, regardless of the forecast. It's simply not a flexible model that can support the world as we know it's going to be. And therefore, unplanned demand is very difficult to cater for. So in future, we believe that future organizations will tap into flexible sets of expertise known as the GigCX to achieve resilience. So if we think that that's going to happen, then we have to find a solution. And we genuinely believe that GigCX supports in delivering in that solution. And the new way of operating will create flexible, on-demand groups of people who have greater availability than any enterprise worker that can be well leveraged in situations like servicing flexible business needs and also natural disasters. And I would class the recent pandemic as a natural disaster. The knowledge of systems and processes, but also a genuine love for the brand and empathy makes this group a real force for the future, and they're known as gig experts. Customer employee experience is at the heart of defining a new CX model. And it's our vision at Limitless to drive that new and disruptive change in our industry and be a force for good, a change that will be best for customers, employees, experts, and businesses at the same time. And our mission is to empower anyone on the planet to earn money for providing brilliant customer service for brands they love and earn fair rewards, earn rewards higher than they could earn if they were in a traditional contact center role. So why GigCX? I've spent my entire career building and running large-scale outsourced contact centers. So I have pretty much done every role in a contact center. And I was always fascinated by those amazing profiles of people that I work with, and some of that you just described, Mark. You know, it's an amazing ecosystem where you get to touch many people's lives. One of my experiences and one of the inspirations for setting up Limitless actually was working with a wonderful woman named Chanda. She worked with one of our healthcare brands, and I was always extremely proud to have her part of our team, but also wanted to genuinely understand how she consistently could deliver amazing customer service and also stayed with us so long. one of our challenges in the industry, as we know, is attrition and churn. And just talking to her, her responses were so insightful. She was part-time and therefore able to fit this work around her busy life and with her own family. And it was actually quite hard to find part-time jobs with that level of flexibility. She loved babies. The campaign she was working on was actually a very sophisticated product set, supporting new parents storing their stem cells from their baby's umbilical cords, would you believe it? But she loved it. She loved every opportunity to talk to parents about this exciting time in their lives. And you could see the energy and enthusiasm in her. And as she didn't work full time, she actually didn't get burnt out. So she felt she could treat every customer as if it was the first person she'd spoken to that day. And she quite simply loved the brand that she was working for. She absolutely loved it. She felt it had a sense of purpose that resonated with her. So Limitless is all about tapping into all those emotional aspects of why Chandra was so amazing at her job and why she loved working with us, but doing that on a much more significant scale and protecting people at the same time. Now, I touched on in the introduction about our good gig model. We have actually built a good gig charter, which means that people, when they join the Limitless platform, become a CX expert, and they are freelancers. So they are signing up to our terms and conditions to be freelancers on the platform. But we have 7 very, very important good gig principles. The first is that we reward fairly, and that we reward fairly in each local market in which we operate. And we support over 25 countries right now. And we pay in local currency. So we never take anyone in that respect, and people can earn 1.5 times what they could earn in a contact center for the tasks that they do on the platform. There's no pressure. The experts have complete flexibility, no schedules, no commitments, no penalties. It's a completely unscheduled model as opposed to a scheduled model. And that means that people are in control. That means people are not forced to do anything they don't want to do. It means people are able to select the tasks that attract them, that they think they will be good at. Number 3 is we encourage independence and promote financial freedom from the platform through other earning opportunities, so people are able to do other things that fit with their lifestyle. Point 4 is we remove all barriers, so we ensure that people don't have to sign up to expensive technology requirements or licenses to use our platform. They don't have to. If you were an Uber driver, you have to have a car. If you're in any other gig model, you have to have a certain amount of kit and materials to work. For us, it's completely 0 barrier to entry. The principle number 5 is we protect people. We make sure experts are protected in each local market they operate, and that the terms and conditions that they are working to are completely legal and compliant in that local market. And the gig legislation is complex and it's different in every country. In America, it's different in every state. We champion diversity and inclusivity. There are 0 bias within the platform because it's completely remote. People don't have to share any information about themselves. And also, of course, flexibility and choice being the final and 7th point. People on the platform are never forced to take a task. They're never forced to do anything they don't want to. And that is what delivers this most amazing results. So since launching Limitless in 2016, we've supported over thousands of experts through our platform. We work with amazing brands like National Express, Daily Mail, Microsoft, and eBay. Some stay for a short period and some stay longer. But for us, GigCX is not a work replacement. It's an add-on. It's about doing what you do and leveraging GigCX to support those amazing brands and earning maybe £3,000 to £5,000 extra every year for getting involved with brands and support. And just touching on COVID-19, just as I finish, we have many examples where the GigCX model has helped our clients' operations with more flexibility, but also helped experts whose employment has been affected by the pandemic. We have many examples where people have lost jobs and been able to leverage GigCX to support them during these difficult times. And we're proud and privileged to be able to do that. So I'm very excited to take part in this debate. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to hearing everybody's views.
Thank you very much, Megan. Again, very good timing. And again, some really compelling comments there and some points there. And and I'm sure Mark has got a lot to say in response to what you've just shared. We have had some questions coming in, some statements coming in through the Q&A functionality on the platform. Please do share your, it could be a comment, it could be a view, it could be a question. So please do feel free to share what your thoughts are on the platform. So Mark, back to you. What's your response to what Megan has just said?
Well, thank you, Megan. I think perhaps surprisingly, a lot of the things that you said in there, I completely agree with, actually, in terms of the, you know, your ethical approach towards individuals and your charter. I think that's really good. So I think some of my responses are not necessarily at your model. They're perhaps aimed more at what is generally perceived as the gig economy model more widely. But I think my own opinion really on the gig model is that there is a danger that it can be a race to the bottom. And I think, as we saw with outsourcing when it went offshore in a big way, sort of 10, 15 years ago, there is evidence that that's happening in the gig economy, and we're particularly seeing it with organizations using apps like Uber at the moment. So it can be a way of just driving cost out. I think that's the first thing I would say. I think secondly, for me, and I think this does apply to your model, it's a challenge using that model for companies where they need consistency and provability, reliability, and perhaps security. So I don't think that model is going to be appropriate, particularly for a number of our clients that are in a very heavily regulated space. So financial services would be a really good example of that. So I do think it's got limitations. I think if people are doing it, and it seems to be the case in your own model, if people are doing this as a top up, then I think, you know, if it's extra income, I really do think, you know, it's fine. But I think what we've seen with organizations, particularly like Uber and Deliveroo and some of those organizations where people are relying on this as their main source of income, the rates have been continually driven down for those gig workers over the past 5 years. And I think there's a real challenge there. And again, it's about that race to the bottom. We're starting to see a lot of UK-based energy companies at the moment starting to offshore back out to India and the Philippines. And I think that's a real challenge, particularly for the UK economy, when we need all of the actual roles and jobs that we have at the moment. The final point I think I'd like to make is around flexibility, because I think this is the reason that people do this. I think it's one of the real attractions of the gig economy. And people do want flexibility. So what I would like to do is challenge the point that you cannot deliver that in an employed way. So Sensée delivers that flexibility to our employees by, from a client perspective, we schedule in 30-minute intervals. We aggregate through our own clever technology, which is our resource planning tool, to deliver the client what they're looking for. But we let each of our employees choose not only the number of hours that they want to work. So a lot of our employees will choose to work 20, 25 hours a week. Quite a few will work 30 plus hours a week, but they choose not only the number of hours that they want to work each week, but they schedule their own hours within the day. So some people, if they've got childcare responsibilities, will, you know, avoid mornings and afternoons, and they'll work in the middle of the day, evenings. Some people will choose to work blocks in the morning, blocks in the afternoon. So it's a very broad schedule. And what that does is it gives the client exactly what they're looking for in terms of that consistency, but it also gives the flexibility through self-rostering that individuals want for their lifestyles. And we have very happy workers, so it works. So I think, again, and I'm probably agreeing with you, Megan, in terms of we've both been in the traditional contact center industry for some time, where traditional contact center operators have staff attrition levels of 60–70% in the outsourcing industry. If you do this in a way that is more palatable to the individual, we have staff attrition levels across the entire business, which are about 10% per annum. So incredibly low. And it's because we've got a very happy workforce. In addition to that, if anybody can care to go and have a look on Glassdoor, the peer review site, our score on that is usually above 4, which is outstanding and astonishing for an outsourced business. So the important thing really here is a way of providing work in the way that people want to work. But from our point of view, it's also giving them a firm contract, guaranteed income, holiday pay, sick pay, etc. Back over to you, Megan, I think.
Thank you. Go on, Megan. What's your response?
Yes, let's touch on some of those areas. So I think you covered business flexibility, which I would like to touch on. You touched on the commercial drivers that organizations are facing to reduce the price point, which, you know, largely historically has resulted in things being offshored. And then a little bit around the reliability and security aspects in terms of the different sectors that this may or may not be relevant for. So just touching on business flexibility, I love your model. I think the idea of you know, people being able to select the shifts and the hours that they want to work, as long as they are available, I guess, is wonderful. For us, we think of it slightly differently. We think of it in the sense that you know, what flexibility and agility is there within the gig workforce to support the business with planned and unplanned peaks in demand, and also not result in a cost for the organization when there is no demand. You know, there have been significant examples this year where demand has reduced significantly in certain sectors, you know, travel sector for one, where actually businesses have had a lot of costs that they've needed to account for, and that has affected their ability to be sustainable and stay in business. So for us, it's about mirroring the cost base with the requirement. The fundamental model we have is that in a contact center, and if we think of a traditional contact center as a starting point, you are operating at a agents are operating at a very high level of productivity in order to make the commercial model work. You know, they have to be busy while sitting in that seat in order to make the business profitable that they're working for. Whereas for us, we have a model where people who are on our platform are effectively at very low utilization. They might be doing 50 to 75 tickets a week to earn that £3,000 to £5,000 incremental a year. And that creates this amazing opportunity for growth to support unplanned or planned peaks when they come in. So National Express is one of our clients, and you know, typically in the winter time when they've been operating at full service, they can't predict the weather. You know, who can predict the weather? They absolutely need to have the ability to flex that workforce to support that demand, to provide brilliant customer service. So it's all about supporting the customers who are in need, who are trying to get to work, who are trying to get their families for the weekend, who are trying to go somewhere for Christmas. So for us, it's about creating an environment that rewards people fairly, but also makes it commercially viable for the organizations. And that brings me on to the next point, because making it commercially viable is absolutely critical to keep jobs in this country. Because as you say, the way people, organizations typically have done that in the past is if they can't afford it, they offshore it to India or the Philippines. With our model, and this is why I'm super excited, because we can save 30 to 50% on a per ticket basis. Effectively, you get an offshore price, but delivering the work domestically in the country that you're in, so say in the UK for National Express example, and you are rewarding your own customers. So you are paying your customers to help other customers. You are not having to take that business to another country, and you are able to keep all of that knowledge and rewards and investment in your local market. So for us, it actually introduces an opportunity to create more jobs and more earning capacity in the domestic market. It also enables that brand to keep the business in their domestic market and invest in their consumers. And then just touching on your final point around reliability and security, it's an incredible space to be in at the moment. The gig model and the analytics that sit behind it in terms of predicting and forecasting are getting more sophisticated all the time. So they do become very predictable very quickly, because fundamentally we are all creatures of habit. We all like to do things with a certain sense of routine. And therefore, whether that's customers answering questions or the experts, customers asking or the experts answering, you build up predictable profiles very, very quickly as soon as you start this. And from a security point of view, our platform, which is the Smart Crowd platform, factors in all aspects of security control to make sure that experts never see anything that they shouldn't see. It's always protected, and the consumer's PII is protected as well. So I do agree with you that there are certain sectors that will adopt this later. Financial services, where it's a heavily regulated, maybe healthcare, but there are many, many sectors where this is absolutely relevant and appropriate for now.
Thank you very much, Megan. And we've started to get some questions in. So I'm going to go straight over to the questions that we've got coming in, and maybe you can see them too. No surprise that quite a few of them are for you, Megan. Don't worry, Mark, you will not be left out, because I have some up my sleeve for you too. So the first question that came in was, what tests are in place to ensure that the workers in the Gig CX are self-employed? Are they able to substitute? Do you consider contact center workers are controlled by the systems they are using to serve customers?
That's a very insightful question, Craig. Sounds like you are an employment lawyer, perhaps. So the answer to that is that PwC defines all of our freelance terms and conditions for all of our experts the world over. You are right, there are measures that define whether someone is a gig worker or not, and substitution is one of those key measures. Are they able to substitute? It's really linked to, are they being forced to complete a task? So if you are in a gig world and you are being forced to start a task and therefore finish it, then as a freelancer or a gig worker, you should be entitled to substitute so that someone could do that on your behalf. In our model, you're never forced to finish anything. So you can start a ticket, you can finish and not finish it. It would simply go back in the pot for someone else. So actually that concept of substitution is less relevant or not relevant in our model. And of course, the aspect of control. So if you are exerting control over an individual, then that constitutes potentially the definition of employment. And with our platform, because of the way it's being built, it is all about freedom of choice, and it is all about people defining the way in which they want to work through the platform. So there is no aspect of control being exerted on the freelancers.
Thank you, Megan. And the next question is actually the first question that occurred to me when looking at the two models, and that's around quality. And so I'm going to come to you, Mark, first. The model that you described, the home working that you have, and you described a model that felt similar to the gig model, in that you can choose your shifts, you can choose when you work. But from a quality perspective, how do you do quality, Mark?
Well, I think quality is essential. I think for me, it comes through consistency, actually. And I think that's probably one of my key queries about the gig model itself, is if you've got people dipping in and dipping out and picking up tickets and not following them through, I think consistency is a real challenge. The way that we ensure in our model that we deliver quality is firstly from getting the right people in to do this. So by offering people what they see as a proper job, albeit with all of the flexibility around the hours that they choose, it means that you've got access to people who are typically more experienced. You can go out to the entire UK to recruit because it's home-based, so you're not limited by geography. So therefore you have access to people who, in fact, quite similar to Megan's model, are brand advocates. So if we were to start with a client, Bupa being a big client of ours, we're able to go out to people who've got a real affinity with that brand, who understand the brand, perhaps have a medical background, so are able to come in and actually be the right people to start with. The second piece is technology. So we have to make a technology platform available which entirely replicates the experience of being in a physical contact center. So they've got access to all of the support, the people, the floor walkers, the managers that they need in real time. So technology is essential to make sure that they're fully engaged. And then I think the third thing is replicating the quality metrics that the client would ideally want delivered themselves. So this model that we operate really does enable us to work in very complex environments. So I've mentioned medical case handling for VUPA, for example. But if you can imagine in a financial services environment where you are managing people's financial information, it has to be very, very high quality. So that partly comes from the consistency of the processes that we operate. And it's also then measured not just by quality metrics, as you would in any traditional contact center, but the outputs in terms of things like net promoter scores, customer satisfaction scores. And by having the right people, really engaged, switched on people that want to be there in a very secure environment, delivering processes in a consistent way, we actually always outperform our clients in terms of quality percentage scores. So this model enables you to do that, and to do it for some very sophisticated, complex processes, which I think would be a real challenge in that gig model, because you haven't got the interaction, the consistency, the length of training that you can have through this employed model.
Thank you, Mark. So Megan, question back to you. How do you assure quality?
Yeah, so it's fascinating listening to you, Mark. You know, there are definitely certain aspects of your model that are aligned to ours. So we start as well with inviting the right people into the program. So Limitless is not a free-for-all. It's not, you can't just go to the App Store, download the app and start, you know, supporting a client. Effectively, and I saw another question on the chat, this will answer that as well, is we work with our clients to understand their own customer bases. And understand who their advocates are within their customers. Maybe they're people who are already part of loyalty programs. Maybe they are people who are active on social media and helping people in forums, and invite those people into the program. So they are coming to us known to the brands. And that's a phenomenally scalable model. I mean, the companies we work with have millions of customers, you know, not just hundreds of thousands. So we're inviting people in to a special program, and it's a partnership program between the brand and Limitless. They are onboarded, so they go through learning. You know, this learning is designed to be bespoke for each client. It is very specific to the types of questions that they will be answering, and that is all done online. So it's all done in a way that is completely flexible for them to do. They are rewarded for that online learning. So if they go live on the platform, they do receive a bonus for completing and successfully completing their learning. They're also fairly incentivized through the platform. So the platform has marketplace dynamics and gamification built in, effectively to ensure people are incentivized to continue to deliver high quality all the time and to maintain their customer satisfaction score. They get real-time feedback from customers, much like you would rate your Uber driver at the end of your drive. That goes straight back into the platform. And if it is a low score, it's immediately reviewed by one of the Limitless Managed Services teams. So we do have a wrap around the product that effectively looks for things that need to be addressed. The most important aspect of quality control in the platform is our peer review process. So my 20 years of building and running contact centers, it was practically impossible for me to have eyes on everything that was going on all the time. And I was entirely reactive to problems. I wouldn't know there had been a bad call or a bad chat until something had been escalated to me by the client. And it's simply a horrible place to be. You're literally chasing your tail the whole time, and then you spend hours investigating. And by that time, who knows how many other bad interactions have happened. So for us, this is about being proactive. Every single ticket on the platform is peer reviewed by 2 other experts. And if those 2 experts both agree that the engagement was handled correctly according to quality standards and processes, that is when the individual that did the work gets rewarded for that task. So it's an inbuilt incentivization and quality control that means that 100% of activities are being reviewed by other peers on the platform. So it's a community managed platform. Compared to my old world, where I would be lucky if I got to look at 2 to 5% of tickets and just, you know, sometimes fingers crossed that everything was okay. Around which is our Smart Crowd platform, we have our managed service where we do engage with our clients. We have service delivery managers who work with them on a weekly basis, do quality calibration reviews, very similar to the types of things you'll be used to with other vendors, just so that we can ensure the metrics are consistent and they can report like for like with how the gig model is working compared to how their either internal or external teams are.
Thank you, Megan. So we've had a comment come in, which I am going to read out. I'm going to try and read it out as eloquently as I possibly can, from William. He says, I'm a huge fan of both. CX BPO has to reflect on the next 3 to 5 years, which will be dominated by 5G, Internet of Things, and greater in-the-moment expectations of customers. Since Vincent Boone ran the gift-gab community for O2, it's always been obvious that a remunerated community of brand advocates was possible. Aligned with the gig CX explosion following the 2008 crash, it's inevitable that the role of the CX BPOs will require the flexibility of gig alongside the demands of different client sectors and brands for on-site or work-from-home models. In fact, gig CX and work at home are key to the successful future of BPOs in customer management and engagement services. So I think that's an interesting comment there from William. Thank you for sharing that. So Mark, I've got a question for you. And for me, this comes down to more of a career perspective. Do you think that there is greater career opportunities in an employed model?
Yeah, I think naturally it lends itself to that. So in our model, which is the employed model, it's about balancing all of the time the flexibility that people want and enabling people to work in the way that suits them and the way that suits their lifestyles, with the fact that they also, I believe, if they've got the choice, will take that and take the benefits of employment. So they will take security. Again, it's back to the point that we start out typically in the contact center world, fairly low paid roles, and the low paid are the most vulnerable. So if you give people a like for like, and I've worked in both actually, one of the big challenges of the gig model in a traditional contact center world was it's impossible to recruit enough people because there's so few people can afford to work in that way. And the minute they get the opportunity of employment, they will take it. So in the employed environment, we try to do that. And that feeds through then into getting around to the question that you asked, which was how do you actually then feed through into a proper career? And in our own model, what we do is we feed through. So everybody that comes in, because they stay with us a long time, they naturally pick up the skills that they've got. Fortunately, we're continuing to grow quite quickly and have done over the past few years. So the careers are there for them to move into. So every single one of our team leaders, for example, was an agent or an advisor. Every single one of our operations managers or strategic account managers was a team leader. So the career progression is not only necessary from our point of view as an employer, it's essential, but it provides really good, proper career pathways to those people that come into our business, which is why they stay with us a long time, fundamentally.
Thank you, Mark. So Megan, I've got a different question for you. And it's a question that Ben's shared. How fast can your platform react to unplanned peaks in demand? Now, we're obviously about to go into, or we're already in peak season. How do you manage peak demand?
Yeah, so, and that's all based on the modeling. So we size the crowd based on it being able to flex 5 times on a short-term basis. So the crowd, if they're doing 50 to 75 questions a week, should be able to do 5 times that on a short-term basis. If that short-term basis, and that means that could be within a day. So we have some great examples. Weather for National Express, in fact, they flexed to over 10 times within 2 days in a particularly bad weekend because the coaches were all stranded because of the ice on the roads. There's a combination there of reasons, actually. One is because they had the capacity to do that. And the second is because actually they fundamentally wanted to help people. You know, people were being stranded. So there's a real sense of community and purpose to the brand in that. Other examples with the Daily Mail Group, we supported a lot of their e-commerce and promotional activity, and the promotion activity drives a lot of volume, and that is sometimes planned and sometimes unplanned. It depends on how things are going, and that has been a phenomenal sort of ebb and flow, or kind of flex, where people, and it's typically over the weekends when that happens, because obviously the paper comes out on the Sunday. So for us, it's immediate. That real time flex doesn't need any notice. If we were basically saying, okay, it's going to be 5 times the volume permanently for the next 3 months, then we'd say, well, we're going to build a bigger crowd for you. But we can do that on a very, very short-term basis, because the crowd just absorbs the volume. The platform sends the notifications out. We can have this concept of surge pricing, so you can reward a little bit more if you need to incentivize people to come to the platform. It's very, very powerful, and actually very humbling to see how people respond when there is support needed.
So looking at it from the other perspective, so we've some of the questions that come in have been more of an internal view, but what about the customer? Does the customer differentiate between whether it's a gig worker or an employed worker? Does the customer care? Megan, I'm going to come to you first on that one. Do they notice?
It depends how it's deployed. Some of our clients deploy this as a very overt peer-to-peer support model, because that actually is absolutely the right thing for them to do. So some clients' websites, they will say, talk to a customer, because they are seeking that as a way to, demonstrate trust, authenticity, and that they completely trust their customers to act on their behalf. Other clients choose to just use us as a resource group. So rather than sending it to your outsourced call center, it is sent to the gig group. And in that scenario, the customer is less aware that they're being supported by someone via this model. So it really, it depends on the customer experience being designed, depending on the nature of the engagement that we are supporting.
Interesting. So Mark, the same question to you. Do you think that the customers recognize, care? Do you think they do see a different experience through an employed model?
That's a difficult one for me to answer, I think, because I haven't got any direct comparisons with the gig model. But I actually believe that customers firstly don't care as long as they're getting exactly what they need. And what we all care about most as a customer is having to wait for service, getting bad service. So I think fundamentally, if it can improve in that scenario, it's probably a good thing. I think where I would raise the question is knowing how complex the work is that a lot of our case handlers deliver, how long they take to get up to speed, the amount of effort and training that goes into that. And then how long they stay with us to deliver that fantastic service. I would say that it's probably down to a complexity issue. So I can see where you're trying to aggregate very simple tasks through this model. I think the customer would rather have a gig worker respond to them quickly than have to wait for ages to not get a response. But I think where you've got a complex service, and certainly in that where we fit into that whole automated journey, when customer contact drops out of self-serve or automation, at that point, it's typically because it is more complex. You need more information available. There's a complaint which needs handling. And I think in those scenarios, and certainly what our clients feed back to us, is they want the involvement, if you like, of the advisors that we have working on their behalf.
Interesting. And Megan, the same question to you, but maybe wrap into that whether the responses that your gig workers have, the question that's come in is whether tickets are responded to by voice or non-voice based interactions. Over to you, Megan.
Yeah, certainly. So we are all digital. So when starting Limitless, we took a look at the landscape and took a view that customers wanted to move away from phone to a digital engagement, as long as digital could be responded to quickly. But also the enterprise, we all know every client has a deflection strategy, either deflecting phone to digital or digital to self-service. And of course, what we enable is we have an IVR to gig deployment option, which means you can deflect phone calls to a digital through our platform to gig. We also support every single digital channel by integrating with your CRM. So you can either connect our platform to your CRM, and whether someone's talking to you via Facebook, WhatsApp, email, chat, whatever, you can push it through to our skill group. Or you can deploy a Limitless Live Messenger, which is an asynchronous widget, which allows customers to engage with you on their own terms. So it's very similar to Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp in terms of that type of experience. And I do firmly believe that live chat, as we know it today, that kind of synchronous engagement, will be defunct in the next 3 years. I think it might take a while for some organizations to remove it, but I do think live chat will be replaced by asynchronous messaging, just because customers want it, and it is definitely much more convenient for brands in terms of their ability to manage.
Interesting. Thank you, Megan. So I've got one last question for you both, and I'm going to come to you first, Megan, and then let Mark, as the proposer, have the final word before we go to a vote. So Megan, my last question for you is, do you think that there is a better place for gig? Do you think that every contact centre should have a gig workforce, either 100% or in part? Or do you think that actually there are some unique places for a gig workforce?
I think currently we're seeing variances by sector. So I think Mark touched on it earlier. I do think gig CX will be part of every CX leader's ecosystem in some way, shape or form, because it does give you the flexibility and the opportunity to really tap into your own customer base. And we haven't really talked about the value that that brings to the organization in itself. So I think that it will be part of every CX leader's strategy in 2021, I hope anyway, and part of that ecosystem, but to varying degrees. So I think we will see in the tech sector, in the retail and e-commerce sector, maybe even in the travel sector, very high penetration. And I think in other sectors, perhaps like financial services, healthcare, maybe even government, will see slightly less. But that's just about the timeline to adopt a new model. So we generally see those other sectors are slightly slower to adopt. So we're particularly excited that the sectors that see and recognize the importance of customer experience and invest in that are leading the way.
Thank you, Megan. So Mark, a variation of that question, do you think that every business should employ 100% of their staff, and or do you think that there is a place for gig work?
Yeah, I actually, I think if using gig as a way of providing an additional top up or some additional flexible service that needs providing, and it prevents that work going offshore, I think I'm a big fan of it. I think what we have to be really careful of in this is that, and we've seen it with so many of the other the big gig providers, the big gig employers, particularly in California at the moment, it's got to the stage where it's really employment by any other name, but companies are using it as a way of getting out of paying national insurance and tax. And it's not really gig work, it's employed work on the cheap. So I think that's the real problem. And I think we have to be really, really careful of that. And I think our employment legislation has to change to reflect that, because we're all working in very, very different worlds now. I think there's a big case going through the courts in California at the moment. There's a big vote actually going on, I think it's on the 3rd of November, to decide whether this is the case. And I think that's also going to influence the big review that's happening in the UK. The Supreme Court are still to come back on that. But I think, so what my final point on that is, I guess, is that yes, there is a place for it, but we have to be very, very careful that it doesn't actually replace what I would class as the employed jobs, the real jobs that people are relying on to feed their families and to pay for their day-to-day living. If it's a top-up and it's an additional service by brand advocates of those companies, then absolutely fine.
Perfect. So I am just going to ask you if either of you have got any further closing comments before we go to the vote. Megan, a closing comment from you?
Just to say, I think as an industry, I'd echo Mark's points, and I really want to make sure that we stand true to that. So our good gig principles are ours, but we would love others that are in the gig world to adopt those as well.
Thank you, Megan. Mark, final closing comment from you?
I think the only thing I would like to say, other than all the things I've said already, which are based on principle, is a practical point that if you provide work to people to enable them to work in the way that they want, you can actually also really scale up really, really quickly and deliver within 30-minute intervals in a way that is really, really flexible. And I do have to just quote the case study that we've got, which is back in May, we actually managed to recruit, train, onboard and deliver about 500 additional employed roles within a 2-week period to support COVID. So it is doable and it can be very flexible in an employed environment. Perfect.
Thank you, Mark. So over to our audience to take a vote. Hopefully you can see the voting window that's just popped open. So having heard from both Mark and Megan, which statement best describes your view? Is it all businesses should employ their contact center workforce? There is no place for gig work. Is it there is a place for both employed working and gig work in the contact center industry? Or is your view the gig workforce is the future of working and all contact centers should move towards a gig workforce? So please do place your votes now. It's a tough one. I think there's practical issues, there's commercial issues, there's ethical issues, there's all sorts of things that come into play. And I think we're nearly there. Couple more seconds. Okay. And the results are, hopefully you can see those results, 92%. Probably as no surprise to Mark, Megan or myself, 92% say that there is a place for both. Really interesting to see that 8% did feel that actually the gig workforce is the future and that contact centers should move towards a gig workforce. But I think as a summary, we've heard two really good arguments, two really valid reasons to employ your staff, obviously, but also to consider that gig workforce in whichever setting is most appropriate to do that. So I just want to say thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Megan, for the CCMA's first great debate. Really appreciate you representing Sensée and Limitless. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you really soon. Thank you very much.